A hopeful little boy sends his allowance to a billionaire seal with a note asking, "Please invest this so I can pay for." My mom's treatment has inspired the man, who is usually cold and ruthless, to take action. That leaves the boy and his mom in total surprise before we begin. Let us know in the share where you're tuning in from, and don't forget to like this video to show your support for the channel. Now, sit back, relax, and enjoy. The story: Ben sat cross-legged on the floor of his bedroom, surrounded by the warm glow of the nightlight casting long shadows against the wall. He had counted the money 3 times already, laying out each bill with care and anticipation. Coin arranged thoughtfully in a neat row on the crinkled sheet of paper in front of him. $347 may not have seemed like much, but it was everything he had, and he pressed on with determination. The tip of his pencil against the lined notebook paper paused for a moment, then started to write in the thoughtful, unique letters of an 8-year-old, determined to sound serious, had already crafted 3 drafts, each one crumpled in a spirited effort to improve, and tossed under his bed. This had to be the one. "Dear Mr. Carter, I am sending you. I would like to discuss my allowance as I see it as an opportunity for investment, especially since my mom is currently facing health challenges. Medicine costs a lot, and my dad says no, but I thought maybe you could help me explore my options. $347 into a lot, just like you do for big companies. Please help. Thank you. Ben." Read it over twice, nodding in satisfaction. It conveyed exactly what he needed it to convey. No extra words, no complex explanations often went unheard, as adults tended to nod along without truly engaging. Expressed his feelings, hoping for understanding. His fingers trembled with anticipation as he folded the paper, slipping it into an envelope with the money and sealing it shut. A challenge arose, but he was ready to tackle it head-on. Without a stamp, he looked toward the door, eagerly listening for any sign of his mom. In the quiet of the next room, he gently pushed himself up and softly padded into. The softly lit hallway welcomed him, the old floorboards gently creaking beneath his socks. Rachel's bedroom door stood open, invitingly, just enough for him to catch a glimpse of her body curled under the blankets. The gentle rise and fall of her breath brought him comfort, and even in her sleep, though she appeared weary, there was a sense of hope in her presence. Ben took a deep breath and tiptoed into the kitchen, eagerly pulling open the drawer near the fridge where his mom stored all the little treasures. He searched through the clutter of scissors, rubber bands, and receipts, eager to find the right spot for everything. The clutter transformed into a vibrant sheet of stamps. He peeled one off with excitement and pressed it down carefully onto the envelope before tucking it into his pocket. His chest felt lighter as he embraced the moment, slipped back into bed, feeling a sense of relief that the hardest part was done. Tomorrow, he'd send it, and then it was just a matter of time as the letter journeyed through many hands. It rested in a vibrant collection of promotional offers and donation requests. The usual correspondence sent to corporate headquarters every day could have been overlooked entirely if not for a junior mail clerk, tired of sorting endless stacks of envelopes, discovered a way to set aside a billionaire. Getting 3 crumpled dollars from a kid with no return address was certainly an unexpected surprise when it arrived. Nathan Carter's desk was already attended to by his assistant, who had skimmed the documents and was eagerly waiting to see his reaction as she stood beside him. He sat at his desk with his arms crossed, eagerly watching as he flipped the envelope over, taking a moment before opening it. The stamp was the handwriting was crooked, reminiscent of a child's, and while he could have easily overlooked it, he often chose to pay attention. Charity requests came in all the time, often disguised as sob stories, but this one stands out in a unique way. "It's different," his assistant said, tapping her nails against the glossy surface of his desk. Nathan eagerly tore the envelope open with anticipation. There's a bit of excitement in shaking out the letter and discovering the handful of cash the paper holds. Lined and affordable, the ink had a few smudges. Yet he read the note with interest, glanced at the money, and let out a short laugh, thinking the kid believes I run a charity. He flicked the coins with his thumb, sending them rolling across his desk. $3. And some change must think I've got magic hands. His assistant didn't laugh. She leaned in, reading the letter again. "You have to appreciate the courage it takes to send a billionaire his allowance and ask for it." Nathan leaned back in his chair, tilting his head just slightly. The wording of the letter was interesting. The way the kid had phrased it felt like a business deal, which added a unique touch. Here's a straightforward request based on reason, coming from someone still learning and growing. For a moment, he considered tossing it aside, but his assistant was there to encourage him, observing him intently now. Eager to discover if he held some hidden human emotion within, he was certainly not ready to reveal it, give her the satisfaction, and instead of tossing the letter aside, he eagerly reached for his laptop. Rachel Taylor, the name sparked curiosity in him, and with just a few keystrokes, possibilities began to unfold. He had everything he needed. It didn't take long to discover that the kid wasn't exaggerating. His mother really was sick, a unique condition that needed medication she was determined to find a way to afford. Despite no insurance and a pile of medical bills, Nathan scrolled further, revealing more about her ex-husband, who was larger than her income, still involved in the picture, especially when it came to their child, Philip Turner. That name sparked a sense of familiarity. He clicked on it, and his screen illuminated with intriguing details about the man. The owner of a mid-level investment, confident and showy. The type of person who enjoys making a splash in the right circles to create an impression of significance, and yet he had chosen not to support the mother of his child in getting treatment. Nathan didn't see himself as a good person, but there was always room for growth. He focused on his own path, finding it frustrating when a man with resources chose to turn away from challenges. To put in just enough effort for the woman who raised his child, he navigated relationships with men like Philip before his assistant still. Standing there, I arched a brow as you looked into it. Nathan shut his laptop. Get curious. Sometimes she smirked. So what's the plan? Are you going to mail the kid? A check for a few bucks can really brighten your day. He scoffed. No. I think I'll make a call. She smiled at the thought. Nathan understood the importance of focusing on what truly mattered, so he chose not to inquire further about its meaning. He was efficient with his time, always prioritizing the calls that counted. It wasn't going to be Rachel Taylor. He had someone else in mind first. Rachel had a habit of skipping calls from unknown numbers, as they rarely brought pleasant surprises. Bill collectors sent automated appointment reminders she preferred to ignore, along with the occasional scammer making claims she could easily dismiss. She won a contest she never entered, and this time it wasn't just a recording of a low, crisp voice. A representative from an interested financial party introduced himself and expressed a desire to schedule a meeting. Concerning a personal matter, the wording was somewhat unclear, which raised some concerns. She sat on the edge of the couch, rubbing her temple, eager to piece together what this was about. I'm excited to share what I have for you, Miss Taylor. It's not a sales call, it's something special. Regarding a letter your son recently sent. Rachel froze, the phone pressed against her ear. What letter? You'll see. Great news. A car is on its way to you now, and we would be grateful if you could be ready. Available to speak. She hung up before he could say anything else, gazing at the screen as if she could will an explanation to materialize. Ben had been enjoying his time with his action figures on the carpet, but now he was watching her, curiosity dancing across his face. Was that Rachel stood brushing off the feeling of excitement bubbling up her spine? Just a wrong number, but 20 minutes later. A sleek black car pulled up in front of their apartment, its polished exterior shining brightly against the backdrop of their worn-down surroundings. In the neighborhood, Rachel pulled back the curtain just enough to catch a glimpse of the man stepping out, adjusting his cufflinks with a confident flair. It was as if he had all the time in the world. She recognized him instantly. Nathan. Carter's grip tightened on the fabric of the curtain. This had to be something special. It's quite amusing to think about how billionaires might unexpectedly drop by the homes of single moms who are doing their best to get by. She had seen his face. It had been on a business magazine cover at the grocery store checkout. And now, here he was, standing right in front of her. Outside her door, Ben pressed his face against the window, eyes wide with excitement. Is that? Rachel didn't let him finish. She spun around, her heart racing with determination, and stormed away, toward the door. He threw it open before he could even knock. You've got the wrong place, she said sharply, and Nathan completely. With a carefree look, I glanced past her into the apartment. I don't think I do. Rachel's. Her pulse hammered against her ribs, but she stood tall, refusing to let herself feel intimidated, even in the presence of the man before her. She might just buy her entire apartment complex and have it all cleared away by lunchtime if. This is an exciting opportunity for you to pivot and make the most of your investment. Carnathan slipped a folded piece of paper from the inner pocket of his suit jacket and held it out. Rachel didn't take it. Take it right away. And when she finally snatched it from his hand and unfolded it, she felt the air shift in a way she recognized. The handwriting immediately made her breath catch in her throat as she skimmed the letter, her stomach fluttering with anticipation as the realization washed over her in a wave. The shaky lines and the carefully chosen words coming together in a beautiful moment. She turned her head toward Ben, who was now standing a few feet behind her, his fingers playfully twisting in the hem of his shirt. You mailed this? Her voice came out sharper than she intended. Ben. After a moment of hesitation, she nodded. It worked, didn't it? Rachel let out a small exhale through her nose, gripping the letter tighter. That's not the point. You sent money to a billionaire. $3. Ben Nathan leaned back with a relaxed smile, leaning against the door frame, observing the exchange with a touch of amusement. $3.47. Quite the bold move. Investment strategy. Rachel turned back to him, determination in her jaw. And what exactly are? What brings you here? Do you have a policy about treating people with kindness when they seek help? I'm curious. I'd have done it from my office. His voice was so calm, totally unfazed that it made her want to slam the door in his face. I came to talk business. She let out a light-hearted laugh. Business? Huh? So this is what it looks like when a letter from my kid arrives at my doorstep. What an interesting twist. Nathan overlooked her hostility and glanced at Ben. Thinking that your son has a great understanding of numbers and thinks creatively. It's important to recognize that Rachel reacted strongly. Do you really believe you can just come in here, flaunt a check, and make everything better? Everything we don't need charity. Nathan observed her, the amusement gradually diminishing. There was a slight shift in his expression, which was positive because I prefer not to rely on charity. The silence lingered between them, then shifted with a hint of uncertainty, glancing back and forth as if he was contemplating the next step in an exciting adventure. Incredible, or something. He was about to be grounded, but Rachel finally shook her head. I'm stepping back. And while I appreciate your presence, it seems like this might not be the best use of your time. I appreciate your gesture, but I'm perfectly fine on my own. Nathan. It's great to see you, though. He remained still and silent, offering a slow nod as if he was thoughtfully processing something. In the back of his mind, he thought, go ahead, do what you want. He said what he needed to, and then, with a sense of purpose, turned and walked back to his car. Rachel closed the door behind her. The moment Nathan Carter stepped off her porch, she turned and leaned back against the door, holding onto it tightly. Let her so tightly the edges curled. The whole encounter had felt like a beautiful dream, something from a movie that could surprise you. But the proof was right there in her hands, Ben's words, his neat little requests, and the surprising fact that it had found its way to the desk of one of the wealthiest men in the country and, somehow instead of laughing it off or tossing it in the trash, he had shown up at their apartment. Ben stood in the center of the room. He shifted on his feet, his hands clenched into fists at his sides, ready for what comes next, was eagerly anticipating her response, hoping for either a shout or a compliment for what he had accomplished. As she ran a hand through, she ran her fingers through her hair and let out a long breath, ready for an important conversation. His chin lifted slightly, signaling his openness to the discussion. You're upset? I'm Dash. She took a moment, considering all the positive words that could describe the situation, could align with what she was feeling. I'm not upset. I'm just taking my time to understand. Ben expressed He let out a breath of relief, but just as he began to settle in, she gestured for him to take a seat. He walked over to the couch and settled down with his arms crossed, feeling that it made sense. Since he spoke, his voice was small but steady. He's truly wealthy, and you definitely need him. Help is always available, and you often remind us that if we don't ask, the answer will always be no. Rachel took a deep breath. She did say that, but asking a billionaire for money is a different kind of request than asking for an extra slice of cake in the diner. She sat beside him and gently rubbed her temples. Ben, you can't just send money to strangers, even if you believe they can help, and billionaires, they don't do things for free. Ben frowned. But he didn't even ask for anything, and that was the part that intrigued her the most. He hadn't, and that made no sense. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. She frowned and exchanged a looked with Ben before gently pushing to her feet and peeking through the crowd at Nathan Carter again. Rachel sighed and pulled. Open the door. You were just here. He smirked, as if fully aware of how much he was getting under her skin, and you didn't hear me out. Rachel gazed at him with determination, considering whether to shut the door in his face again. But just before she could, he raised his hands in a gesture of peace. Just 5 minutes, that's all I need. She could have said no, but she chose a different path and instead she stepped aside, welcoming him in. Nathan made himself comfortable in her cozy little kitchen table, his expensive suit standing out against the peeling linoleum floor, and a stack of unpaid bills sat at the corner of the counter. But Rachel remained standing, arms folded, ready to tackle whatever came next. With determination, he laced his fingers together and got straight to the point, saying, I'll cover your medical costs. Everything covered without any conditions attached. Rachel let out a sharp laugh, and I'm excited to see where this goes. Nathan shrugged. I don't do charity. But your kid brings back memories of someone I used to know. She was uncertain about how to interpret that, but it sparked a sense of nostalgia. Chose to invest a few $100,000 in my medical bills, and Nathan leaned back, totally unbothered. It's just a few $100,000. Rachel tensed up. That's not the main issue. Instead, she stepped back from the counter, moving around the small space with purpose. There's a space between the fridge and the table, and I prefer to embrace my own journey. There's no need for a billionaire to come in and try to make himself feel better for a day. Nathan's mouth twitched as if he was holding back a smile. You wonder if I would be here if I truly cared about PR. Rachel paused. Rubbing at her temples, she asked, Why are you doing this? Nathan exhaled through his nose. Your son showed great initiative by asking me for an investment, which is a positive sign of his intelligence and ambition. I say we give him one. Rachel's fingers curled at her sides. An investment? Nathan, I agreed to cover your medical costs, and in return, you'll allow me to set up a financial plan. Open an account in your son's name that will positively impact his future, rather than focusing on charity. Not pity, just smart planning, she scoffed. You don't even know us. Nathan gave a. Rachel felt a bit uncertain, but she was aware of her surroundings. Everything he was saying had a certain resonance. It made sense logically, and yet every instinct encouraged her to embrace the opportunity. Had discovered that accepting money from a man often came with unspoken conditions, but she remained hopeful and determined to navigate the complexities of such situations. My jaw tightened. I wasn't interested. Ed Nathan seemed unfazed, if anything. He appeared slightly frustrated, but with a calm demeanor, he said, All right, go ahead and do it your way. The way he straightened his jacket, as if this was just another opportunity waiting to unfold. It was just like all the others he closed or walked away from. And Rachel felt a twinge of frustration at how effortlessly he dismissed it, as if her feelings didn't matter. Refusal seemed insignificant, but then she noticed Ben's face. He had been so quiet. And she had. He was in the room, hands clenched at his sides, lower lip trembling slightly, but there was a sense of anticipation in the air. Nathan was ready for what was to come. Just as he was halfway to the door, Ben eagerly scrambled after him, grabbing his sleeve and pleading, Please, sir. Nathan paused, looking down at Ben, feeling a sense of hope that things could be mended. Rachel's chest tightened with a mix of emotions, feeling the ache of guilt and frustration intertwining. She was determined and hopeful about what she wanted. To tell Ben that it wasn't his fault, that this was something beyond his control, but before she could, Nathan crouched to meet Ben at eye level. I don't make deals that get turned down, kid, he said, his voice low and calm. It felt like he was sharing a special secret. And I truly have faith in revenge. Ben's forehead scrunched. Nathan patted his shoulder and said, Don't worry about it. And just like that, he was gone. Rachel stood still, a mix of surprise and wonder, while Ben continued to hold her hand tightly. As they observed the sleek black car drive off, she felt a sense of curiosity about what Nathan was up to. Carter had a sense of what revenge meant, and she felt that soon enough she would uncover the truth. Meanwhile, Nathan sat in his office, tapping a pen with anticipation. Against the surface of his desk, staring at the city skyline through the floor-to-ceiling windows, he wasn't irritated. The irritation was brief and unimportant. He was focused on the calculations as Rachel Taylor had transformed, passing on a deal that seemed like a sure thing, a blend of determination and self-respect. A mix he often found entertaining. But not this time, because this time there was a kid involved, a kid who was really smart, enough to send his allowance to a billionaire and asked for an investment. A kid who still believed in the goodness of people. He made the right choice. If only he had asked in a different way. He set the pen down, reached for his phone, and made a call. Was picked up within the first ring. Let's get a meeting with Philip Turner. His assistant hesitated, but I'm sure we can connect with Turner in finance. That's the one. There was a brief pause. But she confidently chose not to question him. I'll set it up. The meeting was arranged within the day. Turner was the type who couldn't wait. Embraced the potential of business with someone like Nathan Carter, a man whose presence alone could transform everything. Market, if Turner had any idea what this was really about. He would have embraced the opportunity with enthusiasm. Nathan arrived at Turner's office in the early afternoon, walking past the receptionist with a presence that inspired people to step aside. He confidently made his way in, not waiting for an invitation as he pushed open the heavy glass door to Turner's office and stepping inside with confidence. Philip Turner was leaning back in his leather chair, a confident smile on his face, clearly anticipating an exciting business proposal. He was in his late 40s. He presents a polished exterior, embodying a unique charm that may seem unremarkable at first glance. He skillfully uses his resources to enhance his presence, adding a layer of intrigue to his character. Although he wasn't particularly impressive on his own, Nathan Carter, Turner said, standing as if this was what a wonderful chance for friendly networking. I never imagined you would host small meetings. Nathan sat without invitation, resting an elbow on the arm of the chair. This isn't a business meeting. Turner raised an eyebrow and eased back into his seat, his confidence still shining through, even if it wavered slightly. Nathan studied him, taking in the expensive watch and the custom details. In his tailored suit, he confidently reached into his jacket, completely focused on his own interests. Turner pulled out a folded piece of paper from his pocket and slid it across the desk. I just took a quick look at it. Is that a letter from your son? Turner's face remained unchanged. Yet there was a noticeable shift in his posture, which became more rigid. Picked up the paper, unfolding it with casual disinterest, but as his eyes moved across the lines, the faintest flicker of excitement began to emerge. Discomfort crossed his features as Nathan let the S.I. length stretch between them before speaking. Your son sent me his message. Allowance to save for his mother? You're still planning to keep your wallet closed. Turner let out a short laugh, tossing the letter back onto the desk with a sense of lightness, as if it held no weight. Rachel encouraged the kid to take action. This didn't go as planned. She doesn't even realize he sent it. Please, Turner waved dismissively. She's always been quite expressive. The woman tends to make choices that might not be the best and has high expectations of others. Cleaning up after her is no longer my responsibility. Nathan's expression reflects that change. The temperature in the room seemed to drop, and he leaned forward slightly, resting his forearms on the desk, his tone smooth and almost casual. Wrong answer, Turner scoffed. What are you going to do? Share your thoughts on fatherhood, even if you don't have kids. Nathan smiled, and there wasn't a friendly vibe, but I do have power, and I'm not a fan of it. People who waste my time. Turner rolled his eyes, clearly unimpressed. Are we finished? Here, I've got some exciting business to take care of. Nathan stood, adjusting his jacket. Oh, I believe you'll be taking on quite a bit soon. Turner didn't inquire about what that meant, perhaps. He believed he was too untouchable to care. That was his first mistake, Nathan's. The next move was swift, discreet, and effective as he reached out to one of his investment contacts. Teams came together and successfully arranged the purchase of Turner's biggest competitor, a move that was finalized within just 24 hours, boosting the stock. The shift brought about some challenges in Turner's firm, leading to a bit of uncertainty among investors. The next morning, before Turner could even react to what was happening, Nathan confidently took the second step, ensuring that the media discovered Philip Turner's choice to allow his ex-wife to face challenges while their son sought solutions. The story spread rapidly, and the headline was enough to ignite a wave of passionate reactions. Multimillionaire Philip Turner is choosing not to cover his ex-wife's treatment, while his son generously supports a billionaire with an allowance. For help. It was clear that Turner had no legal obligation, yet public opinion played a significant role. They focused on the reality that a man with ample resources had decided to take no action. Clients began to reconsider, and business partners had a change of heart. When Turner became aware of the storm surrounding him, he found that it was already too late. Nathan watched from the sidelines, sipping his coffee as the story unfolded. Curious about Turner's frantic attempts to do. He will either find a way to come back stronger or learn valuable lessons while navigating through the challenges ahead. The outcome would ultimately lead to Turner covering Rachel's treatment, regardless of his initial feelings by the end of the situation. One day, Nathan's assistant knocked on his office door and stepped inside with her tablet in hand. "You're trending," she said, as Nathan smirked while scrolling through the headlines. It was clear that people saw him as a hero. Setting his coffee down, she leaned against the desk, feeling hopeful about the potential for understanding among people. Reading through more headlines. "It seems like Turner is facing quite a challenge, but there's always room for a comeback." Nathan nodded, ready to make a statement and optimistic about fixing things. He'll focus on his image first, and then he'll tackle the issue with financial support. As his assistant looked up. "Look at him." When he does, Nathan will stand adjusting his cuffs, and then we'll see what happens. Rachel Taylor is determined to handle things on her own. Rachel woke up to the sound of her phone vibrating against the nightstand. At first, she brushed it off, rolling over and wrapping the blanket snugly around her shoulders. But the buzzing continued as she smiled, reaching for it with half-closed eyes, the screen glowing invitingly. She sat up slowly. Surrounded by missed calls and unread messages, a sense of curiosity washing over her. Her phone was buzzing with excitement. A delightful surprise compared to the usual quiet days when the only notification she received was minimal. She received appointment reminders and past due bill alerts. But this was something different. Her stomach twisted with anticipation. She clicked the first message. "Rachel, what's going on? Have you seen the news?" She smiled as she opened another. "Are you okay? This is insane." Call. Her pulse quickened with excitement as she scrolled through message after message, from numbers she barely recognized. Before she could process any of it, she heard a lively commotion outside, pushed back the blanket and went to the window, pulling the curtain aside just enough to see her chest filled with anticipation. Reporters' cameras captured a small crowd gathering near the curb, with people holding signs. They hold up their phones, speaking into microphones, eagerly anticipating something, or rather, someone special. Rachel's grip tightened on the curtain as a wave of realization washed over her. Nathan had left his fingerprints all over this. She was ready to move on. Although she wasn't sure of the details, it didn't matter to her. Turned sharply from the window and rushed to the bathroom, splashing cold water on her face, eager to refresh herself. Sleep and shock faded from her mind, but she was ready to face whatever was happening at Ben's door. Creaked open down the hall. "Mom." His voice was small, but hopeful, wondering about the cameras outside. She turned to face him, her heart fluttering at the concern in his expression. She encouraged herself to keep her voice steady. "I'm not sure, but I'm excited to discover what happened." She just needed a little more time. Without hesitation, she grabbed her coat, slipped her feet into her sneakers, and stepped out into the chaos. The moment she was spotted, voices rose with questions. "Rachel, how do you feel about Philip Turner's sudden generosity? Did you know Nathan? Carter was excitedly planning this. And what's your response to the public outcry?" She had no worries. Response as she was uncertain about the conversation. She confidently navigated through the small crowd, embracing the moment. Flashing cameras surrounded her as she confidently made her way down the sidewalk before happily ducking into a cab. She may not have had an exact plan, but she was confident in her direction. Nathan Carter was about to hear exactly what she thought. Time she confidently walked through the front doors of Carter Enterprises, she was fueled by pure adrenaline and determination. The receptionist hardly had a moment to glance up as Rachel Breeze confidently made her way forward. Elevators. She had experienced a building like this once before, years ago, when Philip was trying to impress her. She found herself at a corporate event that didn't quite resonate with her, feeling disconnected from the people and the atmosphere around her. Smiles filled the room as the heavy presence of power lingered, something everyone seemed to acknowledge yet not address. Nathan's office was at the top. Naturally, the doors slid open to a floor that was pleasantly quiet. Pristine and composed, his assistant glanced up with a calm yet curious expression. "Miss Taylor." Rachel was ready to skip the formalities. She was eager to find him, the woman barely holding back her excitement. With a hopeful glance, she tilted her head toward the large office doors. Rachel confidently pushed through, ready for what lay ahead. Knocking, Nathan was at his desk, appearing completely at ease. He didn't even act as if he were pleasantly surprised to see her. If anything, he appeared somewhat amused. Transformed my life into a challenging situation as he gestured to the chair across from him. Have a seat. She didn't respond. What did you do? He asked. Lean back slightly as if contemplating how much to share about your ex-husband, who had a very... He made a small mistake but quickly corrected it after a simple question. Rachel felt a new wave of determination surge through her. You've empowered him to support my treatment, Nathan exhaled, gently tapping his fingers against his desk. No, Rachel. I offered him a chance to do the right thing. He just needed a little encouragement. Her hands curled with hope into fists at her sides. Can you even imagine the impact of your actions? I had reporters outside my apartment. My phone is ringing nonstop with calls from people I haven't spoken to in a while. And Nathan didn't even flinch. And now you can afford your medicine. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Because he was right, he was always right, and she found it frustrating. She pressed a hand to her forehead, furrowed as she navigated through the intense feelings. But Nathan studied her with a steady gaze, ready to understand. I understand that you may not feel a connection with me, but it would be wonderful if you could consider accepting help. Because it comes from someone richer than you. Rachel lifted her head, her jaw tight. You don't get to tell me what I need. I'm not telling you anything. He shrugged. I'm just highlighting that your pride might be hindering your journey to thrive. The words resonated more than expected. She felt a mix of emotions as she acknowledged the truth in them. She took a seat before her legs could give out, gently pressing her hands against her lap. She shook her head, indicating that there was a misunderstanding. If you don't get it, then let me explain it to you, she said, addressing the situation with hope for clarity. It's important to approach things with the hope of receiving something in return. I learned that through experience. Nathan observed her for quite a while. At this moment, I don't need anything from you, Rachel. She didn't believe him, not just yet. She sat in silence, gazing at the desk between them, reflecting on the man who had transformed her world in such a short time. This week, she still didn't have an answer for him. Rachel sat in the car outside the pharmacy, holding the paper bag with a sense of anticipation. The lap felt heavier than she anticipated, or perhaps that was just her imagination. Small vials inside, the ones that had seemed so impossibly out of reach for so long, were now hers, paid in full, discussing with insurance, making calls for extensions. Staying positive. With a hopeful spirit and a determined smile, it was accomplished. The medicine was hers, and there was nothing left to fight. She exhaled and leaned back against the seat, gazing at the street outside, watching people stroll by, living their everyday lives, blissfully unaware of how much hers had just changed. And while she felt a mix of emotions about how it had happened, she was determined to rise above the headlines. Questions the way her life had been brought into the public eye without her permission. But she was not fond of the idea of leaving Ben alone. Even more, she embraced the courage that had been building within her for months and took the pills as prescribed, and gradually she improved. Initially, the changes were subtle. The exhaustion felt lighter, the pain seemed more bearable. And then one day she discovered she had enjoyed a whole afternoon filled with activity without the need to sit down once again. She successfully completed an entire grocery run without feeling like her legs would give out. Ben noticed her accomplishment even before she did. I've been watching her closely, always checking in to see if she needed to rest or if she was okay. One evening, as he stood in the doorway, arms crossed, watching the stove as it stirred a pot of soup, a warm and inviting scene unfolding before him. Crossed, you didn't have to stop cooking once today. She paused, spoon halfway to her dish, with a smile. The pot that you always have to stop by is a great spot where you can lean against the counter or you take a moment to sit down and express that you just need a minute. You didn't do that today. And Rachel blinked. He was right. She hadn't even thought about it. Ben grinned. That means it's exciting. As she worked, she swallowed, glancing back at the soup, appreciating the simple act of cooking dinner, something she had once taken for granted. Absolutely. From that point on, Ben measured everything in moments. The first time she carried the laundry basket upstairs without stopping, the first time she walked him to school. Once more, instead of driving, She found herself laughing so heartily at something he said that she doubled over in joy. Wincing, she had been so focused on what was ahead of her and what still needed fixing that she hadn't paused to. She recognized the incredible journey she had undertaken, and through it all, Nathan was there. It was always in a way that felt supportive, and he checked in sometimes, which was a. He occasionally sent things like groceries or new items without asking, which was quite spontaneous. Ben noticed the kids' shoes were getting worn, and from that moment on, he always made sure to show up at the right time, respecting their space and never forcing his way in. But he made it clear he wasn't just walking away. Rachel still had some uncertainties. She came to terms with it, and then one evening, she took a step she never imagined she would. She invited him to dinner, and it was a simple yet lovely gesture. She approached it with ease and joy. She just sent a text, half expecting him to be too busy to respond, but an hour later, there was a reply, a knock at the door, and when she opened it, there he was, standing in her doorway, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Ben, sitting on the couch with a book in his lap, brightened up. As soon as you arrived, Nathan smirked. Why wouldn't I? Ben shrugged, feeling the moment. I'm not sure. But it seems like wealthy individuals enjoy gourmet meals. Nathan stepped inside. Glancing toward the kitchen where a simple meal was waiting on the stove, I feel confident that I'll make it through. Even if Rachel hadn't anticipated the night to feel so familiar, and it truly did. Nathan sat at their cozy little table, rolling his sleeves up, looking a bit out of place in his expensive watch and dress shirt, but he embraced the moment. I enjoyed listening to Ben as he excitedly shared stories about school and the book he was reading, especially the amusing incident when he got in trouble for correcting someone. Rachel watched her teacher's math lesson, feeling something positive settling in her chest that she couldn't quite identify. To do within just as they were finishing, Ben always had a straightforward approach that was refreshing. Owen Good tilted his head and asked, "Are you my mom's boyfriend now?" Rachel choked as she reached for her drink. Nathan remained completely unfazed, a smirk playing on his lips. Not yet, Rachel thought as she opened her. With her mouth closed, she cleared her throat and said, "Ben, that is not Dash." Ben blinked. "It's a fair question." Rachel put her head in her hands. "But there's always a chance for something sweet in the future." Once more, Nathan chuckled, leaning back in his chair with a look of amusement that was truly delightful. Had ever seen him? "I really appreciate the way this kid thinks," Rachel said with a smile, shaking her head, but she wasn't as flustered as she could have been, perhaps because for the first time, the idea didn't overwhelm her. Ben eagerly adjusted the sleeves of his tiny suit jacket, a determined look on his face as he tried to smooth out the wrinkles. It wasn't a real suit, just a blazer his mom had found on sale that was slightly too big, but it had its own charm. He felt official as he insisted on wearing it today, despite his mom's eye roll. Her eyes and encouraged him to keep things light, but it truly was a significant moment. He pushed open the heavy glass doors to Nathan Carter's office with a sense of ownership, striding in with unwavering confidence. Someone who had spent the past year observing how business meetings worked had gathered plenty of insights from movies and every now and then, we catch a glimpse of Nathan's work life, revealing that influential individuals confidently stride into any room. So he didn't either. Nathan was behind his desk, mid-conversation with someone on the phone, but when he saw Ben, with a playful smirk, he held up a finger to wrap up the call quickly. Ben then popped into the chair across from him, crossing his arms with a sense of enthusiasm. So he said, tilting his chin up, "Did my investment work?" Nathan let out a quiet chuckle. Laughing and shaking his head, he leaned forward, resting his elbows on the desk. "The best investment I ever made." Ben grinned, feeling satisfied. It had been a whole year since he had sent that letter a whole year ago. Having gathered every dollar he could find and putting it into an envelope and entrusted his future to a man he had only ever seen on magazine covers. Someone he was just beginning to discover. What he was doing back then was just that his mom needed help and his dad wasn't going to give it, but now sitting here brings a sense of hope. Wearing his too big blazer in an office larger than their entire apartment, he felt confident that he had made the right call. A knock echoed at the door before it swung open, and his mom stepped inside. She appeared different, not in a subtle way that only those who truly understood her would recognize. She stood taller, moved with ease. The tired weight she once carried had lifted from her. Nathan stood confidently as she approached, sliding his hand into hers as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Ben observed them for a moment, then turned back to Nathan, squinting. So, does this mean you're my mom's boyfriend now? Rachel groaned. Ben with a smirk, asked, what do you think? Ben tapped his chin, playfully pretending to think it over. After all, you did buy her medicine, help improve her life, and keep things moving forward. Showing up even when she acted like she didn't want you to. So absolutely, I'd say you qualify. Rachel covered her face with her free hand, but Nathan just chuckled, squeezing her fingers lightly before glancing back at Ben. It's great to see that Ben leaned back in his chair, feeling satisfied. Wasn't just some kid who had sent a letter to a billionaire anymore. He was the kid who had transformed everything. Nathan had always embraced action, his life a testament to seizing opportunities without a moment's pause. Grabbing opportunities and advancing without hesitation is what propelled him to success. It's what ensured he remained at the forefront. Had always trusted the deal and kept emotions from complicating the next steps. He moved, but this time it felt different. He adjusted the cuffs of his shirt, staring with anticipation. At the candlelit table in front of him, the restaurant exuded a serene charm, quieter than most, creating an intimate atmosphere that felt just right. Chose it thoughtfully in a place that felt easygoing, ensuring Rachel wouldn't sense any pressure to be impressed. Wasn't tonight meant to mark a year since he had appeared on her doorstep? Since that moment she had closed the door? In his face as Ben had eagerly grabbed his sleeve and pleaded with him to stay. It has been a year since he made the decision, and even before he realized it. He knew he wasn't just going to help them and move on. Had stayed slowly, gradually, and naturally. He hadn't even noticed at first how his life was beginning to change. And the things that once felt so important were starting to fade in significance. Then Rachel walked in, brushing the cool night air from her sleeves as she slid into the seat across from him. She appeared more vibrant than ever. In that first meeting, there was a stronger sense of lightness to her, one that hadn't been there before, and yet despite everything, all the progress brought a sense of intrigue in the way she sat down, something special in the way she met his gaze. She told him she knew tonight was more than just dinner as she reached for the menu, flipping through the options with excitement. It opens up beautifully. You've been here before, he said. She smirked. Yeah, but never on the. Rachel always had a knack for managing the guest list, and that was just one of the many things that made her special. Discovered a way to gently remind him that she hailed from a different world, and that their paths were meant to be unique, creating a beautiful story of connection. There was a sense of anticipation as he waited for the perfect moment, allowing her to settle in and enjoy her drinks. Place the order and set the menus aside before sharing my thoughts. I was eager to talk. Rachel arched a brow. You don't say. He exhaled slowly, running his thumb along the edge of his glass. It's been a year. She gave a small nod, as if she knew. I wasn't sure where this was headed, but I knew I could support him on his journey. You opened the door for me, he said. You allowed Ben to trust me, and you've provided me with something I never realized I was missing. Rachel leaned back slightly. Nathan crossed his arms, but he kept interrupting her before she could finish. We could begin. I understand you're anticipating the moment when I fade away, the brief spark of feeling that crossed her face. His expression confirmed his correctness. I understand the feeling of lacking stability. I acknowledged, after a moment, that I tend to anticipate challenges before things have the opportunity to stabilize. It's simply part of my experience. To live, I'm here to stay. The words flowed effortlessly because they were true. Rachel let out a breath, glancing down at the table. It's great to say that now. He furrowed his brow, and she paused, thoughtfully considering her words. Because things are great right now, and sometimes when things are great, people start seeking new opportunities before they. Nathan had witnessed it before. People choose to walk away rather than risk being left behind. But he wasn't one of them, Rachel. He leaned forward slightly. Voice steady. I did just fall into this. I chose it. She met his gaze, then searching for something in his face, something she still wasn't sure she believed. I'm here. He expressed it clearly, saying it's for you and for Ben, not just out of desire, but out of necessity. As she gazed at him for a long moment, the gentle warmth began to blossom within her expression. And just before she could respond, her phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at the screen, and Ben. Nathan smirked, already feeling a bit weary of his Babysitter Rachel smiled as she unlocked her phone, saying, "No, just Ash." Nathan frowned as he abruptly stopped, staring at the screen. What she turned the phone revealed was intriguing. A message from Nathan's assistant arrived, complete with a confirmation. Email. Tomorrow's the day. Everything's set. I really hope Rachel says yes. Nathan blinked, and Rachel narrowed her eyes, curious about what Nathan was up to as he pulled out his own phone, scrolling through his texts, and then suddenly it dawned on him. Ben, that little Rachel sighed, rubbing a hand over her face. What did he do, Nathan? Smiled while running a hand through his hair. I think we're about to discover the next. In the morning, they walked into the courthouse together, with Rachel feeling a mix of curiosity and concern, while Nathan appeared confident and ready. Knew what was coming, and Rachel was in for a delightful surprise when they stepped inside. As Ben was standing there looking wonderfully proud of himself, dressed in a button-up that was just a touch wrinkled from, despite the chaos he had put himself through that morning. Rachel folded her arms with a sense of curiosity. Do you want to share why we're here? Ben excitedly held up a folder, saying, I have a proposal. Nathan let out a quiet laugh, and Rachel joined in. Ben groaned, but then handed her the folder with a bounce in his step. Slightly on his heels as she opened it, Nathan watched her face transform, confusion giving way to something more intriguing. Rachel's fingers tightened around the edges of the adoption papers, feeling a surge of hope as she thought of Ben. Ben squared his shoulders. I just realized Nathan's already been like a dad to me for quite a while. It's been a year now, so let's embrace this moment and make it official. Rachel inhaled sharply, staring at the paper, then at Nathan. You knew? Nathan lifted a shoulder. I might have been informed. Rachel exhaled slowly, looking back down at the document as Ben's voice resonated with clarity. It was a bit quieter this time. You don't have to say yes, but I thought maybe you'd consider it. Rachel had stepped into their lives with confidence at the person who had been there for every doctor's visit, every school event, every single moment that mattered. And she felt a sense of excitement as they stepped outside together, with Ben walking ahead, excitedly sharing his plans about asking for a raise. His allowance now. Nathan slid his hand into Rachel's. She smiled, shaking her head with a hint of joy. What a delightful surprise this has turned out to be. Nathan squeezed her fingers lightly, and it felt just right. The investment I ever made. Ben was so excited in the back seat, his foot tapping with anticipation. Tapped against the floor of the car as he gazed out the window, watching the buildings blur past. This was it, the day. The official no-going-back moment where everything he had set in motion with a single letter was finally coming full circle. He had been patient, kind of. He had waited a whole. This year is all about witnessing his mom's improvement and Nathan's commitment to staying close to the three of them settling into something that felt like a family. Even though no one had said it out loud, and there was still so much potential ahead, it truly feels like a family. He was eager to have it in writing. Rachel sat beside him, her fingers drumming lightly against her knee, a habit she had when she felt a flutter of excitement but wanted to keep it to herself. Nathan was lively in the front, while Ben remained quietly focused, showcasing his usual composed demeanor. There's no doubt that Nathan has accomplished even greater things in his life, like signing billion-dollar deals and buying entire companies. Companies have taken over industries, but today, none of that matters. Today is all about Ben. Was confirming that Nathan was officially his dad, and if Nathan had any issues with that, well, that's just how it is. The car pulled up in front of the courthouse, and before Rachel could say anything, Ben unbuckled and eagerly stepped out. He eagerly launched himself out of the seat, standing on the sidewalk and bouncing on his toes as he joyfully waited for them to catch up. Rachel squinted at him. You're really enthusiastic about government paperwork. Ben shrugged. I enjoy signing important documents. It gives me a sense of being official. Nathan smirked while adjusting the cuff of his sleeve. It's great to know. I'll be sure to bring you along. And on my next merger, Ben blinked. Wait, will I get paid? Rachel groaned, but with a hint of humor. You're not getting paid. Ben sighed dramatically, yet he chose not to argue. He had exciting opportunities ahead of him. They walked into the courthouse together, and it was all refreshingly normal. No grand speeches, no life-altering announcements. Just a delightful moment in the office with paperwork that was already organized, thanks to Nathan's wonderful assistant, Rachel. All she had to do was sign. Yet she gazed at the papers longer than Ben anticipated. Nathan sat beside her, hands folded, absorbing the moment without a hint of doubt. Patient as always, he had been aware of this for weeks. Ever since Ben had asked, his assistant was curious about how the whole thing worked. Nathan had taken a step back. He hadn't tried to intervene, to gently guide Rachel in a direction. He had simply allowed things to unfold as he often did. Many things unfold as we allow individuals to make their own choices, believing they will arrive at the right decision. Rachel exhaled. With a bright smile, Ben said, "You really set all this up, Nathan." "I have connections." Rachel chuckled. "You're almost 10. She shook her head with a smile, pressing her fingers to her temples as if she were contemplating the incredible journey that had brought her here. But then she picked up the... Ben grinned so hard his face hurt as he signed and handed it to Rachel. "The papers." The woman behind the desk smiled. "That's it. Congratulations." Ben practically launched himself at Nathan, who caught him with ease, his usually composed expression shining with joy, cracking just slightly as he ruffled Ben's hair. Rachel watched them with a smile. Her expression was a mystery, but she shook her head with a gentle laugh. "I suppose that makes it official then." Ben pulled back. Looking up at Nathan, I asked, "So, do I call you Dad now?" Nathan raised a brow, and I felt a spark of excitement. "Calling me Nathan this whole time?" Ben squinted. "Yeah, but I have a good feeling about it. We could consider an upgrade. Perhaps for Father, if we're feeling a bit fancy." Nathan smirked, "And it certainly seems like a fun idea." Ben took a moment to consider. "What about Sir?" "Dad." Rachel sighed, but Ben remained hopeful. Nathan chuckled, shaking his head with a grin. "It has a nice ring to it. Feel free to call me whatever you like." Ben took a moment to let that settle, to truly embrace the fact that this wasn't just an idea. Nathan Carter was more than just a billionaire who had entered their lives through a letter. He was something extraordinary. The guy who made things easier, who showed up when it mattered, who had wonderfully become part of their everyday. Without anyone noticing when it happened, he had embraced them as family. And they had chosen him right back. They left the courthouse together, stepping into the afternoon sun, and Ben looked up at Rachel, as they walked, said, "Now that we're legally a family, does this mean I get double the birthday fun?" Rachel sighed, anticipating this moment. Nathan smirked. "He truly is efficient. I'll give him that." Ben grinned. "Well, I learned from the best." Sir, Dad, and Rachel gave Nathan a look. "This is your fault." Nathan only shrugged, a slight glint in his eye, with a spark of excitement in his expression. He's filled with ambition. As Ben walked between them, listening as they bickered playfully, something warm settled in his chest. This was real. This was permanent. It was his family. And for the first time, he could embrace a sense of freedom and joy without any worries. The ride home was quieter than the way there, but it wasn't an awkward kind of silence. It was the kind that came when things felt settled, when there was nothing left to argue about, and no more uncertainty hanging in the air. Ben sat in the back seat, leaning against the window. He watched the city pass by with a sense of wonder, feeling a bit tired, yet there was a comforting sense in simply sitting there and allowing everything to settle. Rachel glanced at him. "In the rearview mirror, you okay back there?" Ben hummed, nodding. "Yeah." Nathan turned slightly in the passenger seat, "Confident in your investment." "Are you?" Ben grinned. "I think I made a..." "What a solid deal." Rachel rolled her eyes, but this could be an interesting opportunity for him to see life in a new light. A series of business transactions, to be fair. Nathan said with a smirk. His first one was incredibly successful. Ben leaned forward between the seats with enthusiasm, "And I didn't even have to. Offering stock options sounds promising, right?" Rachel sighed, expressing her regrets, "But there's always a silver lining. She didn't really." But Ben could tell he had seen his mom at her worst when she had made an effort to conceal her fatigue, believing he wasn't aware, after spending hours focused on the bills. Gently rubbing her temples, as if she believed that with enough determination, the numbers could shift. She had moved beyond that now. She smiled more and laughed more. She embraced every moment when making plans for the future, stood strong as she contemplated what lay ahead, and Nathan had been an integral part of that journey. She may have wanted to admit it or not, but he had always respected her space and had never intruded. He had simply been there, and over time, that had transformed into something beautiful. Everything. By the time they got home, the afternoon light had begun to gracefully transition into evening. Ben kicked off his shoes at the door, stretching his arms over his head. "So, what now?" Rachel set her keys on the counter. "Now, we enjoy a celebratory dinner," Ben asked with enthusiasm, and Nathan raised a brow in curiosity. "Weren't you just celebrating at lunch?" Ben crossed his arms. "This is a new opportunity. This celebration is truly remarkable. It marks the first official night of being an actual family." Rachel shook her head, but a smile danced at the corners of her lips. "Fine, but you're helping Ben." They shared a grin as they moved around the kitchen together, enjoying the simplicity of the moment. About it that Ben almost didn't realize how special it had once been. There was a time when dinner was just Rachel, feeling a bit weary, and quietly creating something simple, because she was conserving her energy for what's ahead. It was all three of them. Rachel stirring something delicious on the stove, Nathan cutting vegetables with a skill that showed he had truly embraced the moment. This before Ben joyfully sneaking bites of things when he thought no one was watching it. It felt just right. Like coming home when they finally sat down at the table. Ben looked between them, a comforting warmth blossoming deep in his chest. He had done this a year ago. He had written a letter and tucked in a few crumpled bills. Sent it to a man who was once considered untouchable, and now that same man is sitting across from him, passing him a bowl of mashed potatoes as if it were just another delightful night. Ben asked, "Hey, Nathan?" Scooping a generous amount onto his plate. You ever consider what could have happened if I never sent that letter?" Nathan paused for a moment, contemplating. "I don't know. But I believe everything happens for a reason. It seems like I want to," and Ben smirked, "so I ended up saving your life." Rachel let out a groan, playfully asking Nathan not to inflate his ego, while Nathan responded with a confident smirk, assuring her he wouldn't. "It seems like you could be onto something." Ben grinned. "Right? I mean, if you think about it. I turned your whole world upside down." Nathan lifted his glass, and in a surprising way, "I'm not upset about it." Rachel shook her head, but she was laughing now. And Ben knew that regardless of what came next, no matter what life threw at them, they were going to be just fine because they were a family. Was everything, and that was what truly counted. If you enjoyed this story, don't hesitate to share your thoughts. Don't forget to leave a like. It truly supports the channel. And if you're looking for more heartwarming and emotional stories like this, you're in the right place. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. I can't wait to hear your thoughts in the comments. I'm excited to hear your thoughts on this one. Thank you for watching, and I can't wait to see you in the next story.